Bullies hit a disabled alien girl. Then 3 human war heroes showed up. The central food court of Nexus Station was a riot of color, smell, and noise. 27 species sharing one echoing space under a ceiling of glass and holo-ads. To most travelers, it felt like freedom. To Veix, it sometimes felt like a cage. She stood behind the counter of her family's tiny cerulean cuisine stall, all 6 limbs in view. Her 2 primary arms moved with calm, practiced motions as she checked portion sizes and adjusted the warming coils. Her 4 secondary arms, thinner and more delicate, betrayed her mood. They jittered and quivered at her flanks in tight, stuttering Orcs she couldn't quite control. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. They always did that when she was afraid. Hey, the word came out as a low, rumbling growl. A shadow fell across the counter. Veix looked up. 4 draconid youths loomed there, scaled, tall, and dressed in expensive fabrics that shifted color with their body heat. The leader leaned forward, palms splayed arrogantly on the counter, his angular face curled into a lazy sneer. I said, he repeated, voice pitched louder. Where's the proper server? Not some twitchy little cripple. His 3 companions burst into chuckles, short, sharp, cruel. Their eyes glittered with the predatory amusement of people who had never been told no in their lives. Veix's throat tightened. She forced her primary hands to stay steady on the counter, even as her secondary ones twitched harder, clacking nervously against the metal edge. I am a server today, she said. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted, but at least it came out. My parents are away on business. How can I help you? He rolled his eyes, making an exaggerated show of looking up at the printed and hollow menus above her head. How can you help me? He repeated, as if tasting the words. Well, for starters, you can send someone with properly functioning limbs out here. You Saruans at least pretend to have standards, don't you? More laughter. A couple of nearby diners glanced over, curiosity flickering across their faces. Then they looked away. Nexus Station's unspoken rule. Don't get involved unless someone dies. Veix swallowed, feeling the blue pigment of her skin intensify along her cheeks. Embarrassment, anger, and shame tangled in her chest. Our food is prepared according to Nexus health protocols, she said, clinging to the script she practiced 1,000 times. All surfaces are sanitized. All ingredients are documented. If you don't wish to order, please step aside for other customers. She meant it as a professional statement. To the draconids, it sounded like defiance. What customers? One of the friends snickered, gesturing to the space around them. A small ring of onlookers had formed, not a single one actually in line. Just watching. The leader's scales flushed a deeper shade, the color of rising irritation. With a sudden swipe of one heavy palm, he struck the small tray of sample bites off the counter. The little dishes spun through the air, clattered against the floor, and scattered sauce across her clean boots. Oops, he said, widening his eyes in mock concern. Clumsy me. But then, accidents do happen when freaks are allowed near food. Heat flared up Veix's spine. She took a step back, only to bump against the prep station behind her. Her secondary arms curled inward, trying to wrap around her torso as if they could shield her. 2 of the other draconids sauntered around the stall's side entrance, cutting off her path of retreat. On her homeworld, the Saruant secondary limbs were sacred, meant for art, cuisine, music, intricate work. Hers had come out wrong. Neural damage at birth, misfired pathways, permanent tremors. She'd grown up dodging stares and whispers from her own people. Fleeing to Nexus Station, when sanctions had ruined their planet's trade, was supposed to mean a fresh start. Apparently, cruelty traveled well. On Draken Prime, the leader murmured, leaning in close enough that she could smell the spicy musk of his breath. Babies like you are given more suitable work. Deep mines. No crowds. No witnesses. Or we don't waste resources at all. The slap came without warning. His scaled palm cracked across her cheek, the force spinning her sideways into the prep counter. The impact rattled the utensils and sent a sting of pain zipping through her jaw. One of his friends caught her secondary arms, and started flapping them around, mimicking her tremors in an exaggerated, jerky dance. "Look," he crowed. "Defective limb display. Come one, come all." Chuckles and nervous titters floated from the onlookers. Some people turned away. Others kept watching, their eyes flicking between amusement and discomfort. "Stop!" Veix gasped, blinking back tears as heat burned along the side of her face. "Please just stop. I'll call station security." "Oh, you'll call," the leader mocked. "You think they care? This is nothing. Just a bit of education. You're in the wrong place, cerulean. People come here to eat, not to watch you twitch." He drew back his hand again. "That's enough," a sharp voice cut in. It came from the neighboring stall, a Medusan merchant whose hair was a living nest of slender serpents, each one coiling and hissing in agitation. She stepped forward, her eyes glinting. "Station security has been alerted," she said, louder than normal conversation. "I told them we may have a violent disturbance in the food court." It was a lie. Veix could tell from the slight tremble in the Medusan's voice, the stiffness in her shoulders. But it was a lie said loudly, and sometimes that was enough. The leader gave a low hiss of annoyance. His eyes darted toward the ceiling where small security drones hovered unobtrusively. Whether they'd noticed or not, no one was sure. "We were leaving anyway," he said. "Almost bored now? This muck isn't worth our credits." He leaned into Veix one last time, his voice dropping into a private hiss. "We'll be back tomorrow. Maybe by then you'll have learned your place." As he passed, he slammed his elbow into a stack of clean serving containers, sending them crashing to the ground. His friends followed, laughing, tails flicking behind them. The watching crowd scattered quickly, the way people do when something ugly ends and everyone wants to pretend they weren't really there. The Medusan stepped carefully around the fallen samples and containers, her snake hair slowly settling. "Are you hurt?" she asked, voice gentler now. "Do you want me to call medical?" Veix shook her head, swallowing the ache in her throat. "No, I'm fine." The lie tasted bitter. "Thank you for saying something." They cleaned up together in silence. When Medusan finally returned to her own stall, Veix stayed in the back, sliding down the wall until she sat on the cold floor. Her secondary arms wrapped around herself in their restless, jittering way. Tears came then, hot, humiliated, impossible to hold back. Maybe the Draconid was right. Some traitorous part of her whispered. Maybe she was taking up space that wasn't meant for her. She didn't hear the sound of cutlery clinking again in the far corner of the food court. She didn't see the three humans seated at a table there, watching every second of the scene with grim, quiet faces. Staff Sergeant Mallet Johnson cradled a cooling mug between his calloused hands, his dark eyes never leaving the cerulean girl. Beside him, Chief Petty Officer Dana Rodriguez had gone still, jaw tight, one thumb rubbing circles on the handle of her fork. Across from them, Corporal Ethan Cole was half out of his seat, shoulders tense. "Sit," Johnson said quietly, without looking at him. "Sarge, they hit her," Cole protested, voice low but shaking. "We can't just." "I said sit," Johnson repeated, the steel in his tone cutting cleanly through Cole's anger. "We're not on a backwater colony with no laws. This station has protocols. We don't start fights in someone else's house." Cole dropped back into his chair, but his hands clenched into fists on the table. "Those were Draconids," Rodriguez said softly. "Upper caste, if the jewelry means what I think it does. Diplomatic brats. Their parents will be part of some delegation." "Which means," Johnson murmured, "station security will treat them like walking political incidents." He set the mug down with careful precision and finally tore his gaze from Veix, who was barely visible behind the stall now. "We do this right," he said, "or we don't do it all." Rodriguez nodded once. "They said they'd be back tomorrow. Young males, late adolescents. Territorial. Creatures of habit. If they made a promise, odds are good they'll keep it." Johnson's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then we have time to prepare." He turned to Cole. "You're up first, Marine. Go by something. Be polite, be casual. Don't bring up what you just saw unless she does. We need a name, a sense of how long she's been here, what support she has. No hero speeches. Just talk." Cole exhaled slowly. It wasn't the punch-a-draconid plan his muscles were craving, but it was a plan. Yes, Staff Sergeant. He stood, straightened his civilian jacket out of reflex, and walked toward the cerulean stall. The girl had wiped her face. Her cheek was reddened where the slap had landed, and her secondary arms were quivering worse than before, but she was upright, reorganizing containers with a single-minded focus that looked a lot like survival. Cole approached with what he hoped was an easy smile. "Hey," he said, "I've been hearing about cerulean food since we docked. Any recommendations for a human rookie?" She blinked, clearly not expecting a customer this soon. Certainly not a human. They were still rare enough on Nexus Station to draw eyes themselves. "We have a few dishes humans usually enjoy," she said, voice small but professional. "Our sweet spice rolls are popular. So is crescent broth. It's mild, not too acidic." "Great," Cole said. "I'll take both." As she moved to prepare his order, her secondary arms fluttered around the work's surface in short, efficient bursts. Despite the tremors, she was quick and precise, each motion practiced. Cole watched without staring, cataloging details the way years of training had taught him. "I'm Ethan," he added lightly. "Ship's Marine Detachment. First time on Nexus. Feels like walking into a festival that never ends." Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "I'm Veix," she said. "We've been here for 6 cycles. It feels less like a festival and more like background noise after a while." He tried to sound casual. "It always like that, with those draconids." Her hands hesitated for half a heartbeat. "I don't wish to discuss that," she said, voice suddenly tight. "Here is your order. I hope you enjoy your meal." Cole accepted the tray and paid. He didn't push. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "not everyone on the station thinks like they do." He turned, letting the smells of the food distract him on the walk back. Behind him, Veix straightened her shoulders and went back to lining up her bowls, as if a tiny piece of normal had been restored. "Well," Johnson asked when Cole sat down. "Name's Veix," Cole reported. "She's been here a while. She didn't want to talk about the incident. Can't blame her, but she's good at what she does." He lifted one of the sweet spice rolls, took a bite, and his eyes widened. "Really good." "Focus, Marine," Johnson said, though a hint of amusement touched his voice now. "We'll come back tomorrow." "In uniform?" Rodriguez raised a brow. "Full dress." "Full dress," Johnson confirmed. "Medals, ribbons, the whole display case. We show up as what we are, latecomers to the galactic party, but not pushovers." Cole swallowed the last of his roll and nodded slowly, the anger in his chest focusing into something sharper, cooler. On the far wall, a security drone rotated and zoomed, its optics logging the humans' faces and capturing snippets of their conversation. Far below, in the security deck, an officer bookmarked the feed for review. In a galaxy full of wars and politics, 3 humans deciding to stand up for one trembling cerulean didn't look like much. The next station morning, Nexus cycled its lights from dim starlight to bright artificial day. The food court woke in layers. Exhaust fans whirring, fryers humming, the tang of frying oils and alien spices slowly replacing the sterile night-cleaning smell. For Veix, dread woke before the lights. She lay in the narrow bunk of her family's quarters, eyes open, replaying yesterday's slap over and over. The way the draconid scales darkened in amusement. The way the crowd had watched and then turned away. The way her cheek had burned and her tremors had gone out of control. Her parents had returned from their supplier meeting hours after closing. She'd kept her description minimal. Some draconid youths made a mess. A friend helped. "It's fine." But the bruising along her cheek, the scattered containers waiting when they got back to the stall, and the sour twist in her father's expression had told her they didn't believe the fine part. "We'll talk to security," her father had said, pacing their cramped kitchen area. "We'll file a report." "And then what?" her mother had asked quietly, wrapping 2 of her own secondary arms around Veix's shoulders. "We anger a family with power on a station that barely tolerates us now. We're already 1/4 away from losing our permit." Silence had followed. Heavy, familiar. Now, hours later, Veix pulled on her work tunic, fastening the pockets by muscle memory. Her secondary arms trembled in their usual restless pattern. Once, she would have strapped them close to her torso before going out, trying to hide them. Now she left them free. The draconids would sneer either way. At least this way, she could still work. The stall felt colder than usual when she opened it. She moved through the routine. Heating coils on, display lights up, fresh ingredients loaded into the refrigeration wells. Her motions were efficient. Her stomach was not. It churned each time the crowd outside shifted, every loud voice making her flinch. 2 hours passed with only a handful of customers. Some regulars gave her a sympathetic glance before veering toward other stalls. Others pretended not to see her at all. News traveled fast on a closed station. No one wanted to be standing at her counter when trouble showed up again. She didn't have to wait long. They came just before the midday rush, weaving through the tables with the same entitled swagger as yesterday. For tall draconids in crisp, heat-responsive clothing, jewelry glinting like small suns against scaled throats. The leader spotted her instantly. "Well, look at that," he drawled, loud enough to carry. The defective survived. I was almost hoping she wouldn't. Would have made the food court easier on the eyes. Veix lowered her gaze, shoulders hunching instinctively. Her secondary arms trembled hard enough that they knocked a serving spoon off its hook. "Say nothing," she told herself. "Don't provoke them. They get bored faster when you don't react." One of the others leaned against the side of the stall, eyes roaming in open contempt. "Maybe we should order something this time," he suggested. "Then send it back in front of everyone. Show them what kind of filth she contaminates the food with." "Excellent idea," the leader purred. "We can call it a public service." He inhaled, about to launch into another insult. "Excuse me, gentlemen," someone said pleasantly. "Is this line moving?" The voice was unfamiliar and yet carried a certain weight, a calm that didn't match the tension in the air. Veix glanced up. 3 humans stood directly behind the draconids. She recognized one immediately, the young man from yesterday, Ethan. Only today, he wasn't just some guy in station casual clothes. He wore blue dress uniform with a row of colored ribbons above his heart and a gleaming insignia at his collar. His posture was straighter, his presence somehow larger. The other 2 were older. The man's hair was close-cropped and threaded with gray. His dark skin contrasted sharply with the bright metal and ribbons on his chest. The woman at his side had her black hair pulled back into a severe bun, her own uniform immaculate. Their boots were polished enough to catch the overhead lights. The leader draconid turned slowly, expression shifting from irritation to annoyance to something colder. "Find another stall," he said. "We're conducting business here." The older human, the one Veix would later know as Staff Sergeant Malik Johnson, smiled with a kind of polite sharpness. "Funny," he said. "From where I was standing, it looked less like business and more like 4 big guys surrounding one small girl and telling jokes about her body." Murmurs rippled through the nearby tables. More devices came out, recording discreetly. "This doesn't concern you, human," the draconid snapped. "Your species is new to the galactic table. This is between us and the defective." Johnson stepped forward, closing the gap between them until he stood directly in the draconid space. He was smaller in height, but there was something about the line of his shoulders, the easy stability of his stance, that made it suddenly hard to imagine him losing ground. "See," he said mildly, "that's where we disagree. When I see 4 healthy young men leaning on someone half their size, it concerns me. When I see it happen 2 days in a row, it concerns me a lot." The draconid's companions shifted, clearly sensing the change. Their leader's scales darkened, defensive anger chasing uncertainty across his features. "You have no authority here," he insisted. "Do you know who my father is?" "No idea," Johnson said, "and I'm not sure why I should care." Before the draconid could answer, the human woman stepped up beside Johnson. "Perhaps introductions would help," she said, tone polite but edged. "Staff Sergeant Malik Johnson, United Earth Marines. 22 years service. Multiple decorations for valor. 3 combat wounds." She nodded at herself. "Chief Petty Officer Dana Rodriguez, Naval Intelligence. 15 years. 3 war zones. And this, she gestured to the younger man, is Corporal Ethan Cole, United Earth Marines Scout Sniper. 8 years, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Distinguished Marksman. The Draconid's lip curled. Am I supposed to be impressed by trinkets you pin to your cloth? No, Johnson said. You're supposed to understand we've seen worse bullies than you, in worse places than this, and none of them scared us either. He turned his head slightly, addressing the food court at large without taking his eyes off the Draconid. Where we come from, he said, voice carrying, we measure a society by how it treats the people who can't hit back. A hush fell over the surrounding tables. The security officers posted at the far end of the court shifted uneasily, hands near their batons, eyes locked on the scene. The Draconid leader's hands flexed. You presume to lecture me on culture? Your species was crawling out of mud when mine traveled the stars. And yet, Rodriguez said smoothly, here we are, standing between you and a girl who's just trying to run her family stall. Cole stepped forward then, deliberately putting his body between the Draconids and the counter. I'll take another order of those sweet spice rolls, he said cheerfully, looking at Veix. They were incredible yesterday. For one fragile heartbeat, the world shrank down to that simple exchange, a customer ordering food from a worker as if nothing else existed. Veix's breath hitched. Her secondary arms twitched, but she managed to nod. Of course, she said softly. The Draconid leader's composure cracked. You dare. He moved to shove Cole out of the way. The human didn't budge. The difference between a bully's posture and a veteran's stance is subtle. One is loud and loose. The other is quiet, coiled, and certain. When the Draconid's hands met Cole's shoulder, they met something that didn't give. Something that had braced against artillery, gravity shifts, decompression blasts. That, Johnson said, almost gently, was a mistake. The atmosphere snapped taut. The three humans didn't reach for weapons. They didn't raise their voices. They simply shifted. Their weight settled. Their eyes sharpened. Years of training slid into the space between heartbeats. The Draconid hesitated. He'd expected a flinch or an apology. Instead, he felt the silent attention of the whole food court pressing in. Dozens of devices were raised now, HoloLenses recording. Last chance, Johnson said, his tone utterly calm. Walk away. Right now. No one has to file a report. No one has to call your father. You go about your day. So do we. For a moment, pride warred with calculation behind those slit pupils. His scales flushed a furious shade, claws scraping lightly against the floor. Then one of his friends shifted, whispering something Veix couldn't hear. The leader snarled. This isn't over, he spat. You and your defective pet haven't heard the last from us. Maybe, Johnson said softly. But maybe you just learned there are some places you can't throw your weight around unchecked. The Draconids turned and stalked away, the crowd parting. Some people recorded their exit openly now. Others just watched, faces unreadable. Only when they were gone did the security officers finally approach, their delay saying more than any apology could. Johnson stepped out to meet them, his expression now friendly, all the edges smoothed away. Minor disagreement over queue etiquette, he said lightly. No injuries. Situation handled. The lead officer, a translucent-skinned Tritonian, looked past him at Veix, at the overturned spoon, at the bruise darkening on her cheek. We received reports of an interspecies altercation, he said. And as you can see, Rodriguez replied smoothly, everything is under control. We're happy to provide statements later, of course. After a brief exchange, the officers retreated to the edges of the court again, still watching, still not intervening. Cole turned back to the stall. I really would like those rolls, he said, voice gentle now. If you're still serving. Veix's hands were shaking, but they found the dough, the spices, the warm griddle. The movement she'd practiced since childhood came to her automatically, even as her heart pounded. Thank you, she murmured, hardly daring to meet his eye, for stepping in. Johnson and Rodriguez joined Cole at the counter, their more dangerous aura gone, replaced by something warmer. No need to thank us, Johnson said. We don't like watching packs go after one person. Doesn't matter what species. But I'm not human, Veix said quietly, the old fear creeping back in. The idea that kindness always came with a condition. Rodriguez's smile reached her eyes this time. That's the nice thing about principles, she said. If they only apply to people who look like you, they're not really principles. They're just excuses. Behind the three humans, something unexpected began to happen. A line formed. Customers. Actual customers. The same beings who had avoided her stall that morning now stepped forward, not out of pity, at least not entirely. Some were curious. Some seemed impressed. Some just wanted to eat where three decorated humans were eating. Looks like business is picking up, Johnson observed. If you don't mind us sticking around, Cole added, we could work through the whole menu. For research purposes, obviously. Veix felt something unfamiliar swell in her chest. It took her a moment to name it. The next morning, Nexus Station began its artificial day cycle with the soft glow of overhead luminescent panels. The food court lights brightened, stalls opened, scents of freshly prepped cuisine filled the massive chamber, and a cold knot sat lodged deep in Veix's stomach. There was no sign of the Draconids. For one strange moment, the absence itself felt like a threat waiting to unfold. She unlocked the stall, stepped inside, and began her routine. Her primary arms worked with mechanical steadiness. Her four secondary arms trembled, not wildly, but more than usual, stuttering, flicking, tightening. Her parents had left early for a meeting with their financial advisor. Nothing to worry about, her mother had said, but her secondary arms had moved in the cerulean sign language of deep anxiety. Veix worked in silence. The morning crowd passed by in waves, some smiling at her with newfound friendliness, some whispering, a few nodding respectfully at the memory of yesterday. Then, halfway through prepping the day's sweet spice dough, she felt a presence at the front of the stall. Not the Draconids. An administrator. Veix's skin paled. A tall, translucent figure stood in an environmental suit, gelatinous form swirling faintly under the reinforced glass plates. Zolocian. Bureaucratic cast. He wore the emblem of the station commercial licensing division. Good morning, the administrator said, voice flattened and translated. Family designation. Tavex provisions? Yes, Veix said cautiously. My parents are. He cut her off. A formal complaint has been filed regarding health code violations and unsafe food handling practices. Veix froze. What? That's not. As per protocol, the administrator continued. Your stall is hereby suspended pending full investigation. He handed her a digital notice. Red stamped. Immediate effect. But we've never failed an inspection, Veix stammered. Her secondary arms twitched violently now. We follow every rule. The identity of complainants is confidential, the administrator said. The investigation will take approximately 7 to 10 cycles. 7 to 10? Veix whispered. We can't survive that long without operating. That is outside my jurisdiction, he replied. His appendages pulsed inside the suit in a ripple of discomfort. Had your establishment not been involved in an unfortunate interspecies disturbance recently, this might not have escalated to formal review. There it was. The truth beneath the politeness. You mean because of the Draconids, Veix said quietly. The administrator stiffened. I did not say that. You didn't have to. He turned without further discussion, leaving her alone in the stall with the red notice blinking accusingly. Customers paused, watched, whispered. By the time her parents arrived, the food court was humming with rumors. Her father's face darkened as he read the notice. This is retaliation. Her mother wrapped 2 secondary arms around Veix. We'll appeal. We don't have the credits for an appeal, her father muttered bitterly. And even if we did, the appeal board is aligned with Concordat trade blocks. Veix felt like she was sinking. Her family's livelihood was suspended. Their permit was in jeopardy. Their entire reason for being allowed on Nexus Station was unraveling. And it was her fault. She slipped the small communication device Johnson had given her out of her pocket. It pulsed faintly in her palm. A direct line to the 3 humans. She stared at it for a long moment. Should she call them? Was this their fight? Would involving them put her family at even more risk? Her father sighed. We must return home. We need to think. They walked together through the bustling corridors. Normally, Veix loved the noise and energy of Nexus, but today every whisper felt like it followed her. Every glance felt sharper. By midday, they were back in their quarters, the stall dark and sealed. Her father pored over finances. Her mother made calls to other cerulean contacts, though most were too far or too powerless to help. Veix sat by the small viewport, eyes on the stars, the communication device in her trembling hand. After hours of silence, she whispered, "I need help." She tapped the device. Johnson's hollow image materialized instantly. "Veix," he said, voice tightening. "What happened?" Her breath shook. "They shut us down." And the moment she said it, the dam burst. She told him everything. The administrator, the fabricated complaint, the 7 to 10 cycle investigation. Johnson listened without interrupting. Rodriguez appeared beside him in the feed, her brows knitting deeper with every detail. Cole entered frame last, fury already simmering beneath the surface. "This is retaliation," Rodriguez said immediately. "Textbook. They think you'll back down," Cole added. "They expect fear." Johnson exhaled slowly. "We're on our way." That single sentence unlocked something in Veix's chest. Something like relief. Something like hope. "We'll meet you in the quarter hour," Johnson said. "We'll sort this." The hollow faded. For the first time since the slap, Veix stood a little straighter. The veterans weren't just passing by this time. They were stepping fully into the fight. The next morning, the Central Civic Chamber hummed with energy. Not the quiet, bureaucratic kind, but the electric tension of a crowd expecting fireworks. By 0900, the hall was overflowing. Dozens of species packed the seats and lined the walls. Holo reporters floated overhead. Every corner buzzed with conversation. Veix sat with her parents in the front row. Johnson, Rodriguez, and Cole stood behind them in full dress blues, their presence drawing stares from half the chamber. On the opposite side sat Ambassador Krelvax and the Draconid delegation. Drexel, the youth who slapped her, sat rigid, jaw tight, scales a pale, unhealthy shade. The director of Nexus Station, a tall meridian with shimmering opalescent skin, called the room to order. "This hearing concerns allegations of discriminatory enforcement," she said. "We will begin with the administrator who issued the closure." Administrator Kaliv stepped forward, looking more gelatinously nervous than the day before. The closure of Tavex provisions followed a formal complaint alleging unsafe food handling. "Were any violations found?" Director Helith interrupted. "No documented violations," Kaliv admitted. "Is the 7 to 10 cycle delay typical?" Kaliv's form rippled uncomfortably. "It is within regulation." "That is not my question," the director said coolly. "Is it typical?" "No. The median review time is 2.3 cycles. A wave of murmurs rolled through the chamber. Rodriguez tapped something in her datapad, a faint smile touching her lips. "And who filed the complaint?" the director asked. "Identity is confidential," Kaliv said desperately. "Not today," Helith replied, voice like a blade. Silence. Finally, the administrator spoke. "Trade Envoy Krelvax." The room erupted. Gasps. Angry whispers. Several species stood in outrage. Even the council members exchanged stunned looks. Krelvax didn't move. His tail flicked once. His eyes were flat, unreadable. "Thank you," the director said. "We now invite a statement from Tavex Provisions." Veix's father stood, but Veix placed her primary hand gently over his. "I'll speak." He blinked at her, then nodded. Veix walked to the podium. The huge chamber seemed to tilt around her. She placed all 6 hands on the metal surface, primary gripping gently, secondary trembling visibly. Every camera turned toward her. "My name is Veix," she began. "I was born with a neural disorder that affects my secondary limbs. On my homeworld, that made me an outcast. On Nexus, I hoped it would be different." She took a breath. 2 days ago, I was insulted, slapped, and mocked in my family stall by 4 Draconid youths. They called me defective. They said I shouldn't be allowed in public. Not a soul moved. Yesterday, our stall was shuttered. Not because of real violations, but because the father of one of those youths used his influence to punish us for attracting unwanted attention. She looked directly at the Draconid envoy. I understand wanting to protect her child, but protecting them from consequences teaches them nothing. Drexel's jaw tightened. Veix continued, voice gaining strength. This is bigger than us. Other vendors, small, neutral world families like mine, have also been targeted. Their stalls were closed under similar pretexts. This pattern is systematic. It is wrong, and it cannot continue if Nexus Station truly stands for neutrality and fairness. She leaned slightly forward. What happened to me should not happen to anyone, and I am not afraid to say so. When she finished, the silence broke like a wave. Applause, sharp, rising, thunderous. Veix stepped back, stunned. Johnson gave her a proud, quiet nod. Rodriguez smiled warmly. Cole's grin was downright radiant. Then Ambassador Krelvac stood. The applause stopped instantly. I will speak, he said. He moved to the podium with slow, deliberate dignity. It is true, Krelvac began, that I filed a complaint. It is also true that I was unaware of my son's role until after the fact. Several beings scoffed. He ignored them. I maintain that food safety is critical. However, he paused, jaw tightening. The timeline recommended did not align with standard procedure. And therefore, he exhaled sharply. The Draconid Imperium withdraws its complaint. Gasps. And we request immediate reinstatement of the Tavex operating license. He gestured sharply. Drexel. His son approached stiffly. You will speak, Krelvac ordered. Drexel swallowed. I apologize, he said woodenly. My behavior was unacceptable and does not reflect our diplomatic standards. I offer compensation for any lost revenue. He stepped back quickly, scales flushed in humiliation. Krelvac nodded once and returned to his seat. Director Helith called a recess. Within minutes, the council returned with a unanimous ruling. The stall reopening was immediate. The closure was deemed improper. Compensation would be issued. A full investigation into discriminatory closures would begin. Veix's parents cried tears of relief. Johnson squeezed Veix's shoulder softly. Cole offered a fist bump. Rodriguez wiped her eyes discreetly. As they left the chamber, dozens of beings approached Veix, offering support, gratitude, promises to visit the stall. For the first time in her life, she felt seen not as defective, but as deserving. Nexus Station glittered under the artificial dusk cycle. Hollow lights shimmered like constellations above the new upper concourse. And beneath them, a new sign glowed proudly. Tavex Cerulean Cuisine, third location. Veix stood at the entrance, greeting guests with all six arms, for trembling, too steady, and all six full of confidence. Her tremors remained a part of her. They always would. But now they were simply movement, neither shame nor secret. Some customers even found the rhythm of her motions endearing. Her parents bustled proudly inside, managing staff and prepping dishes. Business on Nexus had never been better. The neuroregeneration therapy she'd undergone had reduced the tremors slightly, but ironically, she no longer felt the same urgency to fix herself. She had built a life around all the things she once feared made her less. She had built something strong. That evening, in the midst of the opening celebration, her personal communicator pinged. 3 familiar figures stepped through the crowd. Johnson, older but still standing like a mountain. Rodriguez, now a diplomatic officer assigned permanently to the sector. And Cole, wearing the badge of the Nexus security liaison. Veix's face lit up. You made it. Wouldn't miss it, Cole grinned. We've been craving those sweet spice rolls for months. Johnson embraced her warmly. We just came to see what courage looks like when it grows up. Rodriguez smiled. You've become quite the symbol. Not bad for someone who once tried to hide behind a prep counter. Veix laughed, her secondary arms fluttering with joy. Then a figure approached hesitantly from his side. Drexel, not the arrogant youth she remembered. Today, he wore the formal attire of a junior diplomat. His posture was respectful, his scaled face softer. Congratulations, Veix, he said quietly. Your success is well earned. I have learned much since we last spoke. Veix studied him, then extended one of her primary hands. "We all grow," she said simply. He nodded, shaking her hand before retreating into the crowd. As the evening unfolded, beings from dozens of species filled the restaurant, celebrating not just its opening, but what it represented: fairness, courage, and the power of a few individuals refusing to look away. Johnson raised a glass. "To unexpected friendships," he said. "To standing up," Rodriguez added. "To sweet spice rolls," Cole declared. Veix laughed, raising her own glass. "To new beginnings." Outside the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly. Inside the restaurant, Veix stood tall, her secondary limbs dancing their familiar, trembling rhythm. No longer something she hid, but something she had made part of a legacy. Her legacy,